Look at a map right now. You already know where the lines are. Europe ends here. Asia begins there. Africa hangs below. Australia floats alone, and somewhere in your mind, the world is neatly cut into 7 solid pieces. You never questioned it. You were taught it before you could read. But the real answer is far stranger than a geography lesson. The continents you believe in were never discovered. They were invented. Here is the strange part. The Earth does not know it has continents. There is no line in the rock, no seam in the sand, no border drawn by wind or water. Africa and Europe touch. Asia and Europe are one unbroken stretch of land. The only true edges on this planet are oceans, and even those blur where ice meets water. So if the land itself has no divisions, where did yours come from? The answer starts almost 3,000 years ago, on the shores of the Aegean Sea. Ancient Greek sailors needed a way to describe the world beyond their harbor. They split it into 3 pieces based on where the sun rose and set. Europe was the land of the setting sun. Asia was the land of the rising sun. Africa, then called Libya, was simply the land to the south. These were not scientific categories. They were directions turned into destinies. The historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, was already frustrated by this system. He pointed out that nobody could agree where Europe actually ended and Asia began. Some said a river, some said a mountain range. Herodotus himself thought the whole idea was arbitrary, dividing one continuous landmass for reasons nobody could fully explain. 2,500 years later, geographers still cannot agree on a single, consistent boundary between Europe and Asia. Why does a division nobody can define still shape how billions of people see the world? Because a continent was never really about land. It was about identity. Your brain did not evolve to understand oceans and tectonic plates. It evolved to sort the world into groups it could trust and groups it could fear. Anthropologists studying early human settlements have found that group. Identity was often built around visible boundaries first, geography second. A river was not just water. It was the edge of us. A mountain range was not just stone. It was the wall that kept them out. Continents grew out of this same instinct, stretched across a much larger map. Think about what a continent actually does in your mind. It groups people who have almost nothing in common. Someone in northern Norway and someone in southern Portugal share a name, European, despite speaking different languages, eating different food, and living in wildly different climates. Meanwhile, someone in Istanbul, standing on the western edge of Turkey, is told they live in Asia, even though their culture, their trade routes, and their history are deeply tied to the so-called European side. The land did not create that split. A story did. By the time of the Roman Empire, the 3-continent system was locked in place, not because it was accurate, but because it was useful. Empires needed to describe territory to soldiers, tax collectors, and traders. A simple word like Asia let a general point at a map and say, this is what we control, this is what we do not. The continent became a tool of power long before it became a tool of science. Centuries later, European explorers crossing the Atlantic ran into a problem the old system never accounted for: land that fit none of the 3 categories. When the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci realized the Americas were not part of Asia, as Columbus had insisted, mapmakers scrambled to redraw the entire model of the world. A German cartographer, Martin Waldseemüller, printed a 1,507 map that gave this new land a name, taken from Vespucci himself. Overnight, the world gained a 4th continent, then a 5th when Australia was mapped, then more as explorers and geographers argued over Antarctica and over whether Europe and Asia deserved to be split at all. Notice what is happening here. Every new continent was not discovered the way a mountain or a river is discovered. It was decided. A group of powerful men, usually European, usually working for empires hungry for territory, looked at incomplete maps and made a judgment call. Political scientist Benedict Anderson later described nations as imagined communities, groups of people who feel deeply connected despite never meeting. Most of the people they claim to share an identity with. Continents work the same way. just at a larger scale. You have never met most Europeans, or most Asians, or most Africans. Yet you carry a mental image of what each of those words means, an image built almost entirely from stories, not lived experience. This is where the psychology gets interesting. Researcher Henri Taffel, working in the 1970s, ran a series of experiments now considered foundational in social psychology. He divided random strangers into groups, using nothing more meaningful than a coin flip, then watched them instantly begin favoring their own group over the other. Taffel called this minimal group behavior. Humans do not need a real reason to form an us and a them. They need almost nothing at all. A continent gives your brain something to hold on to, and your mind grabs it instantly. So when you say someone is African or European, you are not describing a geological fact. You are activating an ancient sorting instinct. The category feels natural because your brain rewards you for having one. It reduces a complicated world into simple, fast judgments. That efficiency kept your ancestors alive. It is far less useful today. Consider how differently this could have gone. Geologists describe Earth's crust in terms of plates, not continents. The African plate and the Arabian plate are separate. The Indian plate is still crashing into the Eurasian plate. If continents had been invented by geologists instead of ancient sailors, the map you grew up with might not exist at all. You might have learned a world of a dozen shifting plates instead of 7 fixed shapes. The version you were taught was simply the one that arrived first. There is a deeper reason this particular story stuck. It has to do with how children learn to think. Developmental psychologists have long noted that young minds grab onto simple categories first. Continents work the same way. They are taught as fixed facts long before anyone questions them. By the time you can question them, they already feel like bedrock. Few people ever rebuild that foundation. This is also why continents survive contradiction. You already know Istanbul spans 2 sides of a strait. You already know Russia stretches across both categories. None of this breaks the system, because the system was never really about consistency. It was about identity. That question shaped nearly everything before it shaped maps. Long before anyone had a word for continents, early human groups marked territory. Evolutionary anthropologists suggest this behavior appears across many societies. Continents simply gave that instinct a much bigger canvas. Once that story existed, it reinforced itself. Empires and colonizers used continental labels in powerful ways. The model became a moral map as much as a physical one. Even the number of continents was never settled. Some countries teach 5, others 6, others 7. There is no single scientific test proving one system is correct. Agreement, not evidence alone, holds the system together. Yet continents still organize how you see the world. You root for continents in sports. You describe billions of people with a single label. The lines were drawn by people, not nature. So, the next time you look at a map and see Europe stop and Asia begin, remember what you are actually looking at. Not a border nature carved. A border your ancestors needed. The land was always one continuous surface. The lines were never in the ground. They were in you.